Stipko live in New York City, best place in the country, at least for me today. We go to somewhere in the general sort of Maryland area, and that'll be top secret, high code, super confidential information. We go to our pal, Charles Faddis. You know, there's been a few introductions that I've made for you, Charles, where I didn't really do you justice, so I'm just going to read a couple bullet points here. Former CIA operative for 20 years in the Near East, the Far East, and throughout Europe. Former head of the Weapons of Mass Destruction Terrorism Unit. You took the first CIA team into Iraq in advance of the invasion of that exact country. I mean, you are a dude, a captain in the U.S. Army. Thank you for your service. Law degree from University of Maryland. You're like the 007 sort of Renaissance guy with a beard and car hair. Thank you for service, man. I wanted to make sure we got that out there. And we'll talk about the book as well, which just came out, I guess, on paperback, right? Codename Aphrodite?
That's right, just out.
That's fantastic. I would imagine that after all these sort of hardcore, getting your hands dirty kind of spy things that you've done in your life, it's kind of nice to sit back and pen a book and relax without looking over your shoulder or through crosshairs, right?
Yeah, I enjoy writing. I don't know that I ever stopped looking over my shoulder, but I enjoy writing.
Yeah, what's that about? I mean, this is something you've done your whole life, and I know that, you don't drop old habits, they sort of stick with you most of your life, but and you've been trained to, and that's why you're still here in one piece, but is that sort of part of your life now? I mean, that's really what you do. You're checking and looking over your shoulder and observing pretty much everything that no one else would see?
Yeah, you're kind of stuck with that. I don't know if they tell you that when they bring you in, but you can't get rid of that. So
yeah. Do they tell you that? Do they say it's going to stick forever and just get used to it?
Yeah, I don't know if they bothered to give me that full disclosure, but it definitely worked out that way. I still sit with my back to the wall in a restaurant. I got to watch the door, the whole shtick.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little Hollywood on one respect, but it's also reality on another.
Absolutely, man. And you know what happened to Wild Bill Hickok when he blew that roll off?
That's right.
It didn't last very long.
That's right. That was the end of that. One other question, right? My fiance asked me. She said, does he always have even the closest people to him that trust him, or that he trusts, vice versa, family, wife, this, that? Do they always kind of look at you and go, I wonder if he's really, or I wonder if he was watching me yesterday when I was, or any of these things? I mean, or have you made sort of a circle of trust that people trust you?
Yeah, no, I mean, in all seriousness, I think you make a circle of trust. Besides, my family's infinitely more dangerous, so they're not worried about me.
Speaking of danger, Mr. Segway, big news in the last couple days, Anwar al-Awlaki. Did I say it right? Because, there's so many ways to pronounce it. Al-Awlaki, right?
Al-Awlaki.
Al-Awlaki, okay. Taken out this weekend, back 2-3 days ago. Number 2 guy, number 3 guy, somewhere in that range for Al-Qaeda. Kind of big news, it's a big hit. It's the second biggest news since Osama bin Laden being taken out. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts about this issue.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's a very, very significant thing. I mean, this is a guy who is really effectively the operations chief for what they call Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. And the way this conflict has evolved, AQAP, what it's generally referred to, is really sort of the most dangerous element of Al-Qaeda right now. And this guy's the guy who was really organizing attacks inside the United States and reaching into the States. So very, very important. Also, I think important that we got to this guy in relative terms shortly after he emerged. I mean, in other words, it didn't take us 10 years to find this guy and get rid of him.
Right. A lot of the news reports and some of these sort of unnamed Pentagon and CIA sources are talking about the fact that he's been tracked for 2 years, 18 months, this and that. I know from a little more reliable sources, and I'm going to ask you now, surely he's been tracked for longer than the last 2 years. Is that not correct?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on exactly what you mean by track, but this is a guy who's been on the radar for a long time. I mean, he goes back to connections literally to at least 3 of the 9/11 hijackers. So He's been around for a while. Right.
Born in the U.S., but he's claimed that he was born in Yemen, So there's a question as to where he really was from, although he was basically raised and educated here in the United States.
Yeah, there is a little controversy about his place of birth, but basically he's gone back and forth between Yemen and the United States multiple times in the course of growing up. He went back to Yemen once when he was relatively young. He came back here and went to school, and then he stayed here for many years in the States.
Right.
West Coast, East Coast.
Right. How does that? How do you work that? By the way, I know that traditionally CIA works foreign issues, FBI and other law enforcement agencies work domestic issues. At what point does the transfer of surveillance occur, if for lack of better phrases?
Well, I mean, there are a couple of hard rules, and one of them is that if you're on U.S. soil, the Bureau's in charge. So there's a lot of cooperation. There may be multiple people who are involved in the picture.
Right.
But for real, the FBI owns the turf. So if you're inside the United States, the FBI is making the decisions.
So there's no issue about, let's see, it originated in Denver. So regardless if he goes from Denver to Damascus, it's still an FBI case. Or the minute that they leave the domestic soil, it transfers over and then transfers back if they come back.
Yeah, well, if he leaves the United States, if we started in the States and he goes overseas, theoretically the agency should now take primacy. That doesn't always work that way, actually. Every once in a while you turn around and find out that the guy's been in Amman for 18 months and the Bureau never bothered to tell anybody.
Right,
but
right.
That's...
Is that one of those issues where, for example, that people bring up about the 9/11 lack of communication between the left hand and the right hand? Is that kind of one of those issues?
Yeah, I mean, that whole issue is a lot better now than it used to be. I mean, really infinitely better. But yeah, I mean, that's the kind of, the Bureau's, actually, here's the way it usually plays out when it's most problematic, is less about the guy lives in Denver and then he relocates to Amman permanently. When it's really problematic is when he takes trips from Denver to Amman, but doesn't really move.
Right.
And then the question becomes who's in charge of the operation. So.
Right. The agency is traditionally an intelligence gathering unit. There is some actual tactical operations, but traditionally it's an intelligence gathering unit. The Bureau is traditionally a law enforcement unit, but there's a little sort of trade-off between the two. Is there ever any rivalry? You see so much on television. You see so many sort of drumped-up stories. No offense to codename Aphrodite, but you see stories and things that have been exaggerated. How accurate is that?
Yeah, see, I think it's very simple. I mean, the agency does all the work, and then the Bureau calls a press conference and takes credit. That's how it works.
Okay, so clearly you have no effect on that. All right, so also killed was Samir Khan. It's funny how we bring these names up. Samir Khan from North Carolina. This guy published Inspire, which is the jihadist magazine that was printed in English, and was a bit of another rebel rouser. Do you know if they were actually targeting him as well, or was that just sort of a CIA bonus? What's his deal?
Yeah, my understanding is what happened here was they took the opportunity to hit Anwar when he was moving, because when he was stationary, there were problems with collateral damage. In other words, when his location was known, but there were too many people in the vicinity of him for somebody to comfortably make the call to hit him, because other people would have been killed.
Right.
So they took the opportunity to hit him when he was in transit, and they had no idea who else would be in that car. So Samir Khan was just a target of opportunity in that sense.
I see. You talk about collateral damage. This was a drone hit, a CIA drone hit. Is an unmanned flight vehicle, about 1/4, 1/5 the size of a typical jet, maybe somewhere around there. These are being used a lot more now since the Bush administration. I mean, they've been around since before that, but really the Bush administration, they became more popular in CIA strikes and other strikes. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. And now they're being used heavily. I mean, we've invested more money in drones than ever before, now with the Obama administration. Are they more surgically accurate in a situation like this?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely correct that we have really expanded the use of these things. I mean, Obama has used them much more frequently than even Bush was using them. So This is the weapon of choice.
Right.
It depends on what you mean by surgically accurate. I mean, I always get uncomfortable with that term. I mean,
Well,
people
collateral damage, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is that when you fire this thing, you're firing what amounts to an anti-tank missile off of the drone. So you can be really careful and you can do really careful target selection, but you're still talking about a fairly large weapon that goes off. So if you fire it at a house and there are houses next door, there is some likelihood you're going to kill or injure people in the other houses.
Wow. That's a big bomb. Are these not to get too technical, but are these laser guided, where someone on the ground or someone nearby is painting the target, so to speak, and then it's fired from the drone, and then the drone meets the laser beam that's actually on the target, and that's how these are aimed?
Yeah, typically not. I mean, I know what you're talking about, where you use a laser designator, and exactly what you said, you paint the target, and then
right.
Whatever the munition is rides in to hit that. Typically, these are not. Typically, these are because you got a live operator. I mean, basically, you got a pilot. It's just not the pilot's not in the drone. The pilot's got a live video feed.
Right.
So the pilot fires the munition from the drone as if he was in a cockpit on the drone, basically.
Right. Interesting we were talking about Obama and the buildup and increase of use of these drones, which obviously, as we've just demonstrated, they're more effective, and we're being careful not to hold you to any collateral damage statistics or anything. But for all intents and purposes, they're more effective, they're more pinpoint, more cost effective. And they definitely do the job. I mean, Anwar is no longer alive. They took him out, took 3 others out. It's funny. Moments ago, days ago, weeks ago, we've heard, even years ago, we've heard a myriad of, for lack of better words, attacks against the use of enhanced interrogation techniques. And, here we are ordering drone strikes. Now, I'm 100% for striking Osama bin Laden, 100% for striking Anwar, no question about it. And yet, the same president that's ordering one is speaking out against an administration that used enhanced interrogation that led to the capture and killing of Osama bin Laden. Bit of a hypocrisy here, at least on the surface. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that. I mean, it's not just that we've walked away from enhanced interrogation techniques, right? I mean, what we've done is we have completely abandoned the practice of capturing people alive on the battlefield. And I think really walked ourselves into a situation that doesn't make a lot of logical sense. I mean, I think this is fundamentally a political decision. And because of that, we've ended up in sort of an illogical and even hypocritical position, because we will not capture people alive on the battlefield, and really the only reason for that is because this administration doesn't want to deal with all the issues that then result from what you do with them afterward.
Give me a little more detail on that. Is that now kill or capture is no longer an assignment? It is now just kill? There is no capture? So when a target's chosen, that's that?
Yeah, I don't know that anybody's formally signed a memo that says we will never again capture anybody.
Right.
But as a practical matter, we've ended up in the situation that you just described. So first of all, the choice of drones obviously means you're not going to capture anybody because they don't provide that opportunity. So when you rely on drones and you're building new drone bases and you're doing all this, you're pretty much saying that we're focused exclusively on killing these guys. And it really is just because we don't want to have them in custody, because they become a political lightning rod for criticism. How are they being held? How long are they going to be held? What rights are you going to give them? So you're so concerned about that you won't capture them, but at the same time you have no problem with vaporizing them with missiles. So it's a little hard to piece all that together and defend it logically. As I say, I think it's really a position that's dictated by political considerations.
Your approach is so common sense and so clearly logical. Obviously, with a law degree, you're experienced at putting together the common sense component here, and that's just what this is. It's like, how do you go on and bash and condemn enhanced interrogation, torture, as other people have called it, and then on the flip side, the other side of the sword, you go in and you use these drone strikes. So, I don't know. I don't have a problem with the drone strikes. I don't have a problem with accurate and effective and controlled and appropriate use of enhanced interrogation. I just have a problem with the hypocrisy, which kind of gets to me these days, particularly when politics start messing around with war and religion, and this whole mix gets into this potpourri of problems. If you were running the country right now, how would you separate the enhanced interrogation from the drone strikes, from the politics, or would you?
Well, I should say that, I've made this statement a million times. I was never a supporter of enhanced interrogation, waterboarding and the like. Mm-hmm. I don't, first of all, a whole variety of reasons. Let's start with it. I think it's wrong. I also don't think it's nearly as effective as people have made it out to be.
Is that not what led to the capture of Osama bin Laden? Is that not how we got information?
There is information that's been derived from these guys. I think in some cases it's been exaggerated. But here would be my other comment on that would be, why is it that every time we capture one of these guys, that everything that he has to tell us is a revelation? We're spending billions on intelligence collection. Right. We're supposed to be running spies inside these networks. Right. So why is it that we don't know anything until we capture one of these guys? That to me is a reflection on the quality of your intelligence collection more than it is on the value of this guy.
But Charles, you've got an advantage that most people don't. Most people have the advantage of believing, or at least listening to and getting their information from the CNN and the Fox and the this and the that. You've actually been on the field. You've been in the sand. You've gone through the Pentagon route, all of it.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make a case that we never learned anything from any guy that we ever used these techniques on.
Right.
But I don't think it's nearly as effective, and I don't think it's necessary to start with. I've interrogated a fair number, probably more than most people, members of Al-Qaeda, members of other Sunni extremist groups. And all of them talked. And we never laid a finger on any of those guys.
What method do you use? How do you encourage them to go against what they believe is a religious standpoint that they would go to their death for, typically?
Yeah, well, without getting into too much detail that we want to talk about. Interrogation done properly, which is is not fun and not nice and not comfortable, is really a psychological game, and it's about getting the guy to a point where he recognizes that he has no options other than to cooperate.
Right.
And so that doesn't mean it's fun for him or you're nice to him, but on the other hand, it doesn't mean physically mistreating him or subjecting him to anything like these enhanced interrogation techniques.
Right.
What I think most people don't realize is that these enhanced interrogation techniques, these EITs as they're called, they do not represent the way the Central Intelligence Agency conducted interrogations before 9/11. They're really techniques that were brought to the game by what I would describe as amateurs that came in after 9/11, who were convinced, I think, by watching a lot of grade B movies that this is how you do this kind of thing. So I've never seen the necessity for it. I think there are real moral issues with when you go down this road of physically mistreating people.
Sure.
I think there are practical considerations about the blowback you experience throughout an entire region when this kind of word of what you're doing comes out. But that's separate from capturing and holding guys. You can capture and hold individuals and not subject them to any of this treatment.
Right. How do you separate the decision, and I'm certainly by no means, Charles, saying that you're saying anything hypocritical, but how do you separate what you just said in theory from what the Obama administration is saying in theory? They're basically saying, okay, no EITs, but we're going to go ahead and basically violate every possible human right, of Anwar, for example, by basically, as you put it, vaporizing the guy. That's definitely a human rights violation, at least for him. So how do you rationalize yours with theirs?
To me, okay, you're referencing the legal training. So to me, having not only been a lawyer but having been a JAG officer in the Army, I would just go back to the bedrock of following the law of war as a default position. As long as the guy is an enemy combatant and you're in a position, and he's in a position where he is engaged in hostilities against you, you can kill him. Once you have him in custody and he is a prisoner, then you treat him according to the laws of war. If you got certain select guys that you think are really war criminals and deserve to be put on trial, then we can handle them the same way we handled the Nazis at Nuremberg.
Right.
And the rest of them we hold according to the laws of war as prisoners of war, which means, among other things, that we can hold them until the war is over, which is, God knows how long that's going to be.
Right. Speaking of which, what's going to stop this? What's going to end this seemingly endless conflict in the Middle East? I mean, I know that's a huge question that could be answered over a period of years, but seriously, on the broad stroke of things, how do we stop this?
Yeah, I'm kind of a pessimist in that respect, to be quite honest with you.
So am I. I mean, I talk with guys around here all the time, you know, in similar positions to yours, as well as guys on the street, and you know, the falafel guy in the cart downstairs, and all over the place. And I ask him, you know, I said, what can we do to stop the fighting? I know it seems kind of an amateur question, but really, it seems like there's absolutely no possible way. The left side is not going to agree with the right side, and that's that. And they're just going to fight and kill until, you know, the next generation.
Yeah, I mean, what I think is that we can obviously protect ourselves and we can put a dent in the capabilities of the guys that are trying to kill us. But in terms of an end to this conflict, I think it's a generational war, to be honest with you. I mean, I think the things that are adding fuel to this fire throughout the Middle East and South Asia and other parts of the world, all those trend lines are getting worse, not better. I mean, you look at, I mean, the chaos level around the world is rising. So I don't see this conflict petering out for the foreseeable future. I would say decades.
Yeah, I agree. And I think actually before it peters out with the Middle East versus the West, I think it's got to peter out within the Middle East itself. I mean, I don't know how we can get out of being involved in it, number one. And number two, as long as they're in conflict, somehow we're going to be involved in it as well. You know what I mean? And the minute that we pull out, they're going to still continue their conflict between, you know, the Israel and the Arab and the this and that. It's like this cluster that you can't break. And you mentioned a generational thing. Problem with that is generations don't stop and start, you know, on the same stop and start line. You know, it's like each one overlaps. So the previous generation has the opportunity to train, to educate in their culture the next generation. And what happens is these feelings are almost bred into the next generation. So therein lies the problem, in my opinion. It's like it's an impossible cycle to break. Yeah, it's kind of doom and gloom. We're ending the segment with doom and gloom, Charles. We're talking to Charles Faddis in D.C., Maryland, in that general vicinity, former CIA operations officer, fantastic guy. We're going to be back in a minute, and I want to talk about the threat of al-Qaeda in Yemen still. So, Stipko Live, we'll be back in just a minute.